Well, thanks for doing this portion of the visit with me. As Tim mentioned, we're trying to gather, I guess, information from our visiting scholars about the role that research methods has played in their careers and in their work that they do. And so I thought it would be interesting for me to hear what you remember of kind of how what methodological training you had and how it's impacted the work that you're doing together now. I know that's kind of a long train. So maybe to start with kind of what sort of research methods training did you have?
Louis, want to go first?
Well, I think I had in graduate school, pretty standard research methods training for a cognitive psychologist. I learned about research design. I learned the statistics of the day, which are different than the statistics of this day. But I think where my methods training diverged probably from that was when I had my first job at Bell Labs, where I learned what computer scientists do for a living and learned what designers do for a living, and tried to then merge what I knew as a cognitive scientist with what I was learning as a designer and software person. So I think I probably had pretty standard training, mostly quantitative and mostly experimental, until I started to learn what happens when people try to build things.
And so would you say that there's a design-based research perspective to that merge? Because that's sort of what I think of as design-based research, right? That intersection.
Yeah, but it didn't have that name then. It was probably the name that it had when I started to learn to do it was sort of human-computer interaction research. And yes, it does bear a lot of resemblance to what people call design-based research, which I think still has this kind of artifact center to it. It's always trying to make a thing, which I think was not part of my standard training as a social scientist, but became part of my training as I learned what software people do for a living. And I want to be clear, it wasn't so much writing software, though we did some of that. It was mostly trying to understand in some disciplined way what to write software about.
Does that still play a role in the way you think about the kind of work that you all are doing?
It does. I mean, I think, but in a particular way, I think that the artifacts that people use are one of the things that we can use to learn about the processes that govern their work. So I think the work that we do now is perhaps even more so than that other work centered on learning. And maybe what I know from the work I learned how to do from human-computer interaction and working in the learning sciences in its infancy is that these are useful lenses on how to understand people's work. And so understanding people's work is the goal. Whereas I think that you would hear a lot of other people talk about design-based work where the thing, the artifact is the goal. And so I think that our work these days uses artifacts to help us learn about work process, but the artifact itself is not the end goal.
The artifact is the occasion.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tony, can you say a little bit about, I'd like to see if we can converge on this at all, or if it does converge?
Well, my formal training in graduate school was in statistics. I did I was in the Graduate School of Education at Harvard, but did half my program in the statistics department at Harvard, and had this wonderful opportunity to work with what were then the kind of great names in statistics, Bill Cochran and Fred Mosteller and Art Dempster. And so I did the basic doctoral sequence in statistics, from mathematical statistics to sampling, analysis, variance, experimental design, the whole gamut. So that's formal training. But I think that when I think about methods, I think about methods as servants. What's in the first position is the question or the problem you're trying to look at, and then it's a question of what set of methods is most likely to help you illumine that work. So I've had a number of different experiences in my professional career. Part one was a teaching experience. For a number of years, Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot and I taught this joint course on methods of inquiry, where I did the quantitative and statistics part, she did the qualitative part, and the theme of the course for students was the marriage of these two different forms of inquiry in the purpose of advancing our understanding about education, teaching, and learning, our educational system. So that was my kind of personal deep engagement in qualitative methods, and a lot of the work I've done has involved interviewing and observation and fairly intense field study. I think another big formative experience was in doing the work that we were engaged in Chicago, where we were starting a school from scratch. We were about inventing a developmental literacy assessment. These were essentially, I didn't know the language at the time, but these were essentially design-based problems to work on. It was in the course of doing that work that Louis and I really connected in, and we actually did this work together on something called an information infrastructure system project, which really was about, it was about designing artifacts, in this case how technologies could be brought in, and initially it was NKO, the school we started, to better support the work of teachers and students and what they were routinely doing. And so it was design-based about the artifacts, but it was about creating, as Louis was saying, stronger work systems. So that's where the kind of design-based strand came from. But the overarching theme is it's about methods in support or as servant to actually advancing some important problem you're working on.